Autism spectrum disorder.
It's a condition which involves challenges with social communication skills, restricted interests, and repetitive behaviors.
There are 500,000 children on the spectrum in the United States alone.
That is 1 in 68 children.
Making ASD a serious and growing public health issue.
The financial and emotional tolls on families are great,
with parents incurring many out-of-pocket expenses,
as well as losing work hours and career advancements.
The cost is nearly 10 times more
than raising an average child.
With early access to treatment and care, we can significantly improve a child's outcome.
But access to effective interventions is less available for some,
especially families who are under-resourced.
We aim to change this situation.
We are AIRB!
We are AIRB.
Autism Intervention
Research Network.
For behavioral health.
We bring community and academics together.
Our studies have targeted core impairments of social communication in home and school,
enrolling over 1,100 families and children in research. AIRB has been in the community for nearly 10 years.
We have been pioneers in the field of collaborating together in community settings
instead of research centers.
We work in homes.
We work in schools.
We teach skills and strategies to children and to those who care for them.
Our interventions are informed by you.
We listen to each other.
Together, we have pushed the field forward of increasing participation of under-resourced and underserved families in research,
and increasing outcomes for children, families, and teachers,
and improving research designs,
and bringing greater awareness to the community.
We are AIRB.
Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. This is AIRB Network's Community Autism Conference, and I am Sue Lee, Associate Project Scientist at the UCLA Center for Autism Research and Treatment. For those of you wondering what AIRB is about, we are a partnership of universities and community partners across the country, and we focus on increasing access to effective interventions for children with ASD, especially those from under-resourced communities. Here are some of our key community partners of UCLA, including regional centers, schools, and community organizations that serve Black, Latino, and Korean families of children with ASD. And our work would not be possible without the help of our community partners. Some housekeeping announcements. So this conference is being recorded, and the recordings will be uploaded to our website, airbnetwork.org. And you'll be able to access not only today's conference, but also our Korean and Spanish conferences that were held past couple weeks. And thanks to our speakers, you're also going to access presentation slides, which will be emailed to you and also posted on our website. If you look towards the bottom of your Zoom window, you will see the Q&A button as well as the chat button. If you want to ask questions to our speakers today, please use the Q&A function. If you have general comments or just want to talk to other attendees, use the chat function, please. And we highly encourage you to interact with each other, but please keep the conversations respectful and no spamming. Before we end today, we'll post a conference evaluation survey in the chat. It's really short, easy, with just 2 questions. But for organizers of this conference, these are really valuable feedback. So please complete the survey if you can. We look at the survey every year to improve our conferences. And another reason to stay until the end, we are going to do raffles at the end, and winners will get gift cards. And to help us stay on schedule today, our staff member, Brandon, will prompt us with his timer when it's time to wrap up a presentation and move on to the next section of the conference. That's it for announcements. And now we'll hear a welcome message from our leaders, Dr. Connie Kasari, who leads the AIRB Network, and Ms. Felica Jones of Healthy African American Families.
Welcome to our 9th annual community conference. I'm Connie Kasari, a professor at UCLA and the principal investigator of the federal grant that supports our conference. I'm also currently the president of the International Society of Autism Research. And I'm here today with our community partner, Felica Jones from Healthy African American Families, a nonprofit health agency in South LA. And together, we've been working in community for the betterment of autistic children and their families.
Well, thank you, Connie. It's wonderful to be back again for another exciting year to bring our conference to the community as in partnership with the community academia. This has been a long legacy of the late Dr. Loretta Jones and community partner participatory research, which was her heartfelt to make sure that the community could be at the table at every stage of research and to make sure that we're being bidirectional and learning together. So this is a wonderful time for us in our partnership. And thank you again for attending this year. As I know you will learn a lot, we will learn a lot, and then we can grow together. So thank you again for your attendance.
Yes, we're so pleased to have you join us for what's surely going to be an informative couple of hours. This year, we're focusing on skills that are important for autistic individuals to be successful in school, home, and community. And we're going to hear from community experts, researchers, and autistic individuals themselves. This conference was planned between researchers and community partners, and several of them are listed in your program. So we want to thank all of you who contributed to the planning of this conference and hope you'll take home some new ideas and some new knowledge. So have a great meeting.
Yes, indeed. And make sure that you can share this information with anyone and everyone that you know, because it's important that we share this information to break down stigmas and increase knowledge. So have a wonderful conference.
Okay, so that was a message from our leaders. And today we'll cover information and tips for each life's transition, early years, school age, and transition into adulthood. And we're gonna start with early years. My co-facilitator, Ms. Aziza Lucas Wright Bernardo, will help introduce some of our speakers today. She's an assistant professor at Charles Drew University of Medicine and Science, executive director of South Central Prevention Coalition, and consultant to Healthy African American Families. Thank you, Aziza. Could you tell us about our early years presenter?
So happy to do that. Can you see me?
Yes.
Or hear me? Okay, wonderful. So I'm very pleased and I'm very excited to introduce our first presenter. Dr. LaFawn Gordon is the founder of Children and Families Incorporated, a nonprofit organization, and is a licensed clinical psychologist with an expertise in child clinical psychology and working with at-risk and traumatized infants, toddlers, and preschool-aged children and their extended families. Today, she will discuss social emotional skills in early childhood. Please welcome Dr. LaFawn Gordon.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I really appreciate it and feel very honored to be here. And I just want to make sure that I'm able to provide as much important information as possible. And as you can see here, this particular part of the talk will be about social emotional development and skills. And it truly is a necessary skill when it comes to thinking about individuals who have special needs, such as being on the spectrum, and just in general, the importance of social emotional development really throughout each person's life. So I want to kind of start just briefly with just this idea of a young child who is starting out, whether that child is moving from even an infant program to a toddler program or to preschool. There is this impending excitement about being a part of this new adventure and just going out, moving from your family to this area of meeting new people, meeting peers, and then having that opportunity to actually socialize with these new individuals. So as you can see, for many children, it might be the very first time even leaving home. And then this first opportunity for real independence in this new setting. And so for many of us, including for kids and adults, parents, it may be a little scary, but at the same time, there is, some excitement with it. And some of the things that would be important for just children in general to be prepared for as they move into this new area is this idea of being able to have some independence, whether it relates to simple task of dressing themselves, being able to hold a utensil in order to feed themselves, having this opportunity to put toys away. For some, it may be having prompts to do that. Listening and following simple directions would help in terms of this moving in this transition. Again, part of the basis of social emotional development. And then completing simple routines and understanding and being able to accept support when needed in moving through these simple routines. And then also this idea of being able to take turns. And, for many children, leaving, for example, a home environment, and then now moving into a setting where you now have to compete with other children with that primary caregiver, it may take some time, to be able to be thinking about this and wanting to take turns. Oops, let me go back for just a second here. Okay, and now looking at some habits that we may not even think of until we're really supporting a child and moving in this direction would be just the habits of showing interest and curiosity about various tasks and various toys, successfully starting and finishing small projects, and being able to sit still, even for just a few minutes, and attending to a simple task. And it may be something kind of as basic as having circle time or being a part of a group, and just the idea of being able to spend that time with new friends and with new teachers for just a short period of time are habits that we want to continue to grow. And as we do so, we're building more interaction and more relationships with various individuals, with new peers, and with new teaching staff. So let's kind of look a little bit at just this idea of social emotional skills. Oftentimes we don't really think about that, but even as adults, these skills are really important. And the first would be the ability to really modulate and regulate behavior. These are things that we kind of expect for children to do, but oftentimes children are not able to really do that until first they have the opportunity of getting some modeling of that. And this is where this co-regulation occurs. And so in order for a child to really be able to successfully have this kind of skill, they have to look to many of us to be able to be modulated ourselves. And then once we are able to be modulated, we have the opportunity of really showing some positive modeling for that child in terms of helping with their own regulation. So the next skill, if we look here, is the ability really to engage with others in this back and forth pro-social behavior and just approaching it in a positive way. And that continues to help us build in terms of social emotional functioning. And then there's also that capacity to be able to communicate, not only non-verbally, but verbally as well. And then we do know with certain children and individuals who may have certain special needs or need more support, we want to be able to figure out a way how we can help and support them in building the capacity in both verbal and nonverbal skills. And then lastly on this slide, we really want to help promote this sense of mastering confidence and success with children, and us being able to support them and really kind of to model that we're really kind of building on their self-esteem. And that part is really important because we really want them to feel confident in moving into, new areas and transitioning after building more socially emotional tasks. Okay, so let's look at some other areas. One being curious and then taking pleasure in discovering one's environment. At times we may forget that part where it could be, for example, we're wanting a child to focus on one particular activity, and then they may become curious about something. Like, for example, let's just say outside during playtime with other peers, and you have a child who is just fascinated with the various colors of the flowers or the leaves or the blooming. And us having the opportunity to go to where that child is and being able to encourage and support more curiosity, asking them, maybe simple questions about, what color is this? Or what do you think is happening? Or what's going on with that ladybug? All of these things to really kind of build even more on their curiosity and interest, and us showing that interest, in the same things as this child is taking delight in. Next one here is having this internal drive, which is very different, I have to say, from this external aspect. But this internal drive and being intentional about expressing oneself through action and words. Oftentimes we may be thinking that it really is helpful to give as much verbal praise to a child and in really encouraging them. And oftentimes it is really important. But we also want to take into consideration is this idea of intrinsic motivation and having that child want to do something or to show curiosity in something because this is something that they want to do, not necessarily always about getting something and receiving something. With intrinsic motivation and internal drive, this really leads more into long-term positive impact in behaviors, not necessarily just only, I will do this, or I will show curiosity, or I will behave in a certain way because someone on the outside or some external drive is pushing it. So as much as possible, we really want to support that internal intrinsic motivation. Also with social emotional development, we really want to look at the relationship that this child has with various individuals. We really want it ideally to be a rich, healthy, strong relationship with those very important individuals that are involved in that child's life, whether it's that child's parent, caregiver, teacher, childcare staff. It is so important that we really build on having this really trusting and caring relationship, and for that individual to be as compassionate as they can be. One question to ponder would be, what would be some other skills and working on building social emotional development, and what works as a work in progress? Even for many of us as adults, it continues to be a work in progress as far as building our own social emotional skills and that capacity of having this healthy back and forth communication. In order for a child to really experience that in a positive way, we ourselves as adults, we want to be able to model that, for our very young children. All right, so let's kind of look at some critical social emotional skills. So we have a couple of things just to be thinking about, and what's really important, starting at a very early age and then moving forward throughout our life developmentally is, let's start with confidence as a really good foundation in building social emotional skills. This confidence of, or this feeling of mastery and success. We would like children at a very early age to already feel that kind of sense of confidence in what they're doing. And then, as I mentioned earlier, just having curiosity and pleasure in discovering, what is in their environment, and us as adults taking pleasure in what this child is discovering and having curiosity about. And then, as I mentioned before, this intentionality in terms of internal drive, in terms of expressing through action and words. We really want the child to feel this from within, and us supporting them in this intrinsic motivation to do the various things that they are curious about. So moving into some other critical social emotional skills would be self-control. Going back to this, earlier I was just saying in terms of this idea of modulating or having self-regulation, self-control is aligned here, where there is that capacity to modulate one's behavior. When we become dysregulated, how we're able to pull ourselves together where we can regulate and have the opportunity to really communicate effectively in terms of the things that are important or that need to be addressed. Relatedness, for many of us, and also for those who have certain special needs, this is really important. This back and forth communication and active engagement with very important people in our lives, and then even having the opportunity to develop new friendships and new relationships, and having that capacity of this back and forth communication. And also aligned with that is the capacity to communicate, both verbally and non-verbally. Whether we're using either forms of communication, we really want to build on circles of communication. This idea of one person initiating communication with another, that second person being able to pick up on the ideas and the things that are expressed by the first person, and then ultimately that first person responding to the second. And you can just imagine this lovely back and forth between a child and this very significant other important person in that person's life, whether it's the teacher or their parent, and having the capacity to move back and forth in communication and building on developmental capacity, expanding from that child's ideas of what they wanted to share with the other individual. And then lastly here, in terms of critical social emotional cooperativeness, and then just being able to balance this back and forth and sharing of ideas and negotiating and being able to share with others in cooperative play, cooperative relationships, but just building on that. Okay, so I'm just going to go back in terms of what would make a difference. And thinking about what makes a difference is one important for all of us, is you making a difference, and just reminding yourself that you do make the difference in that child's life. Okay, it looks like I have some good timing here, and I will stop sharing.
Thank you. That was great. I think you raised so many great issues for all children, and especially in thinking about children with special needs, or in particular, children with autism. You talked about active engagement and communication, the importance of peers, special interests, really following that child's special interests and highlighting those, which is really important. But I think, that sort of sense of belonging in the school setting is so important. And, sometimes the childcare setting is the first kind of real school experience for a child. And so I'm interested in sort of that sort of how you sort of foster that engagement with, all of your kids. Do you have particular strategies?
Yes, because I have to say, just in my experience, that it becomes easy to decide this child is different from everyone else. And when we have a caregiver or a teacher who has the automatic assumption that this child does not fit in this setting, it starts to create that kind of dynamic. And then before you know it, we have other children who are, whether it's non-verbally, but just the actions of watching others kind of make this child in a unique, different way, can feed into something that's not going to be healthy overall. So oftentimes I have to say, I spend a lot of time supporting and educating our childcare staff, as well as our parents. We try to make all of our meetings inclusive and talk in terms of this is a village. We need every single piece, and helping our teachers understand that every single child in this class, not just this one, has some uniqueness. And we want to be able to support that child, but integrate that child into this environment so that we can be able to move into this back and forth communication. And if it's a child that may have a difference in terms of communicating more so non-verbally, and we have everyone else verbal, well, let's figure out how we can still come up with a common language so that it is still something that is inclusive. So I would have to say a lot of it is first kind of doing some psychoeducation, and then really moving into interactive types of meetings and support where we have parents and teachers together and we talk about these very things.
Right. Yeah, we had a question from one of our audience members who raised this issue about, well, if my child is a particular age, but when they're tested or they're evaluated, they're actually, functioning at a younger age. Shouldn't we be paying attention to that younger age? And, I was thinking in childcare, you tend to have a range of ages of children. And so it may be that in that kind of small window of ages, it's a little easier to say, if you have a child who's 4, but is, understanding things at a 2-year-old level, to sort of put them closer to the 2-year-old group in terms of their interests and their activities. And I don't know if you do those kind of flexible groupings or if that's one kind of strategy in addressing some of these concerns from parents.
I think so. The thing to be cautious, though, is not just assuming that all developmental areas are at that particular age. And so sometimes it can be tempting to say, because this child is performing developmentally at 2 in this developmental domain, we're going to put this child in that setting totally. And we lose the opportunity to continue to support the child in other developmental areas. So that's how come I'm a strong believer in inclusion and really, again, education and looking at how we can foster and support the child across developmental domains.
Such an important point. You're right, because we tend to have this kind of uneven set of skills amongst our children. They've lived for 4 years, so they've picked up many things, and they're very similar to 4-year-olds.
Right.
And so I think that's such an important point. And inclusion, in community, in school, and life is so important. I don't know if there are other kinds of questions or strategies that you've used besides just these kind of flexible groupings and children all together.
If you just wouldn't mind me highlighting one more time the importance of starting with whoever those important individuals are for that child, the parent, the guardian, and the teachers, the childcare staff. If we could first start with bringing these very important individuals together first and in a very strength-based way, and then talk about what are some of the things that are strengths for this child. And then when we move into challenges, if we can be thinking first about the strengths and building on it, then we have a better opportunity to work collaboratively together versus what typically happens is someone in a childcare setting or school setting sees something that's different or atypical and they send a referral, and it's almost like imposing that, okay, this is what needs to happen, when first we need to start with, let's see if we can build this village first and supports in trying to understand the child from various contexts in their home environment versus in the school environment. It's just amazing how much we can learn from each other versus just our narrow point of view of, I only know and perceive this child from this perspective, when it's important for us all to come together and have a more holistic perspective. And that's why I think, having meetings with parents and teachers together first, and then let's talk about what the needs are and how can we build on strengths.
Absolutely. How, in your setting, how are parents involved? You say you have parent-teacher meetings, but there are probably other ways in which you try to learn about the child's, background or life circumstances. How does that happen for you guys?
I have to say that's exactly what happens first. Whereas over a decade ago, it was, as a consultant psychologist, I would get a referral and then I'm immediately assessing need, but I'm missing very important points. Even in myself as the one going out, I only have this one perspective. And it's like, well, wait a minute, I need all of these very important aspects. I often say that I'm the facilitator of change. I am not the agent of change. Me professionally and personally, I strongly believe the agents of change are the individuals that I mentioned earlier. The parents, the guardians, the childcare staff, the teachers. I need those parts. I may have an expertise in a certain area in terms of birth to 5, but they are the experts in what goes on daily with this child. So that's why I need to bring those parts in first. And that is the first thing that we do, is we have meetings with parents and teachers together first. And we really talk about typical routine at home. Oftentimes, the childcare staff is not aware of certain things that are going on at home, and then vice versa, having the childcare or teaching staff talk about typical routines. And it's amazing how much you can learn about those different settings and how all of those different things, not to mention what else is going on with the child. There may be some history that may not even be on the surface for that child that's playing out, and they're not able to even to tell you what's going on, but we see it in their behavior. And so that's why it is important to have those very important parts first, and then talk about assessing for a plan.
Right. We have a question from Fabiola, who's asking, why isn't there more school choice? I live in an area that doesn't offer the best schooling or opportunities for my child. He's only 3 years old, so I can't go to another district or regional center because I'm within those boundaries. Now, you're in a childcare center, and so I don't know how that works in terms of choice, but I would imagine there's some choice. Yes.
And I'm afraid I can't answer all of it, but the only thing I can say, which I am still, it's a learning and process for me, is that just recently I asked an educational attorney to speak to many of our families about things that even I didn't know as a provider, that it was really important for parents to know in terms of educational rights. And what children deserve in their settings. And if they're not getting it in their school settings, they do have an educational right to seek that out. And their district is responsible for supporting them in meeting that child's educational right. I'm not an attorney, so I have limited knowledge. It's just that I really find that to be very important. And it is important to really understand what is your child's educational rights.
Right. What is the child's needs, and can those needs be met in the school that you are supposed to go to. And so, of course, you want your child in the neighborhood school, but sometimes it doesn't work out that way. So you do have rights, especially if your child has a developmental disability. They can start school at age 3, and there are options. And so I think those would be really good sessions for parents, I think, to have, especially in the childcare setting as they're starting to think about schooling. All right, so I think we are just about to the end of our time, and we want to really thank you for presenting. It's so important to get the sort of holistic view of all children and what their needs are, and inclusion especially. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I think okay.
All right. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Okay. So for our next part, it's our early years resource session, and Eastern Los Angeles Regional Center has created a video for this conference, and we are going to take a look.
Hi, and welcome to the AIRB conference. My name is Priscilla Solano, and I'm an Early Start Supervisor with the Eastern Los Angeles Regional Center. Thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation today. I will be providing a brief overview of Regional Center services, specifically to early intervention. There will also be a PowerPoint presentation provided to you that you can reference at your own time. So what is Regional Center? It is an organization under contract to the Department of Developmental Services, or DDS. And what do? We coordinate and fund for services for persons with developmental disabilities. There are 21 regional centers in the state of California, with 7 being in the county of Los Angeles. I'm going to show you our DDS website, so that way you can find out how to get to your appropriate regional center. And this is the DDS website, where you will find out which regional center you correspond to. So if you scroll down to Regional Center Lookup, so as mentioned before, there are 21 regional centers in the state of California, which are all listed here. But we're going to go to Los Angeles County, and we're going to click on Eastern Los Angeles Regional Center, but you would put in your zip code, and then the correct regional center would come up. So we're going to go to the ELARC website, and here's the ELARC website. So there's a lot of information that pertains to all different services, but today we're focusing on Early Start and also applying for services. So if you go to the Apply for Services tab, it gives you a wealth of information on different criteria, the Early Start program, and also how to apply for service. So as mentioned before, we're going to just give a brief overview of regional centers. So who do we serve? We serve persons with developmental disabilities, including intellectual disability, formerly known as mental retardation, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, autism, and other disabilities closely related to intellectual disability and requiring similar treatment as a person with intellectual disability. So regional center programs include early intervention, which will be our focus again today, but we also have school-age programs, young adult programs, and adult programs. So what is early intervention? So early intervention is a program provided under Part C to infants and toddlers birth to 36 months of age who meet early start criteria. Just so you know, early intervention is a federally funded program, so each state does have its own early intervention program, but in California, we're unique in that we have the regional center system. And early intervention services are also provided by public school districts, family resource centers, and other service providers who are contracted by regional center. Along with that, the referral sources and how regional center receives these referrals come from NICUs, physicians, daycare centers, our local education agencies or school districts, other social service agencies such as DCFS, and then parents or family members can also do a self-referral. So this is the referral process that you can reference in the PowerPoint on your own time. And then this is the procedure for determining eligibility. So who is eligible? An infant or toddler shall be eligible for early intervention services if he or she is between the ages of birth to 36 months and meets one of the following categories. So developmental delay, defined at 25% below age expectation, high risk for developmental delay, or an established risk for developmental delay. So again, this information regarding eligibility will be detailed in the PowerPoint. Just to mention that the developmental delay is defined as a significant difference between an infant or toddler's level of functioning and the expected level of development for his or her age in the 5 developmental domains listed here. So again, with regards to high risk and established risk, this information will be provided in the slides. So what are the early start services that we provide? So the early start services include service coordination, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech and language services, special instruction, or mental health services. And so with that being said, there are other services that can be part of that child's service program. So transportation, vision, nursing. So with regards to funding for services, regional center is considered the payer of last resort. So that means that we ask families to still access their private insurance, whether it's Medi-Cal. There's also generic resources such as CCS or California Children's Services and programs with the district. I've also included a slide on resources that you can review. Thank you for your time today, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to either myself, Priscilla Solano at elarc.org, or Nancy Leyva, who is also an Early Start Supervisor, with her email at nleyva@elarc.org. I hope you found this presentation helpful. Have a great day.
Thank you again for the ELARC team for providing the video. Now we're going to go from early years to school age. And Aziza, she'll introduce our school age session presenters.
Wonderful. I am enjoying this so much. This is such an informative convening today. It's marvelous. So we are now going to pivot to Dr. Andy Schlink, a postdoctoral research fellow, at UCLA, and Beza Ayalu, a staff research associate, and they are part of the Kasari Lab research team. They work with students and teachers at schools and will tell us about the ARB network's Remaking Recess Intervention, a very novel piece that we're excited to hear about, which aims to make recess more inclusive for students. Please welcome Dr. Andy Schlink and research associate Beza Ayalu.
Great. Thank you so much for that kind intro, Aziza. We're just going to queue up our slides. Here we go. I think you guys can see them. So we're going to kick off the school age portion of this workshop, and we're going to talk about Dr. Kasari's intervention called Remaking Recess, something that we've been using in our lab, and it's technically in our 4th iteration right now. So excited to share what it is and some of our findings over the years. So what is Remaking Recess? It's a social engagement intervention for students with neurodevelopmental disabilities and their peers. So it's school-based and it's mediated. So really how this works is that we as coaches, we go into the school, we coach up paraprofessionals or TAs on these principles, and these TAs then in turn intervene on kiddos. The ultimate goal in this intervention is to help kids on the spectrum make and maintain friends. And the way in which we're able to do this is we're able to target social engagement and social interactions. And these things we've realized we can intervene on, and they are malleable to change. So I mentioned before, it is a playground-specific intervention. So in its creation, I know Dr. Kasari was very intentional in considering the final context in which this intervention would take place. So really trying to move away from this idea of ivory tower research, where things are really controlled and neat and tidy, and trying to consider, where it would take place, which is in schools out on the yard. So, and it's our very first pilot study when we tried to see if this works, we did it directly in schools. So really trying to situate this intervention where we would want to see change, which is in the community, on the ground level, out on recess. I'm really glad Dr. Gordon mentioned this idea of agents of change. That was something that we were especially mindful in the creation of Remaking Recess and also manualizing it. We realized that paraprofessionals and not teachers would be the best agents of change. We realized that they are the experts. They are the ones who are out on the yard with the kiddos, and they're the ones that would likely induce the most change in terms of trying to promote social engagement and social interaction amongst our kiddos. Of course, also in creating the manual, we wanted to fit intervention strategies that would be conducive to the context of the yard. So being very mindful of that as well. And then above all, I consider this a global intervention. So obviously we have kiddos in our study that are on the spectrum that would especially benefit from this type of intervention. But what we do in terms of environmental rearrangement and organization of the yard, it really does benefit all children who are out there, which is a really neat consequence. Context definitely matters. So in terms of anecdotal and empirical evidence, we've seen, feedback from community members that, adults who are able to reflect back on their time out on the yard and during their school days, that recess is an area in which children on the spectrum may require some additional support. So Remaking Recess is able to close that gap a little bit from research to the real world by providing direct and more equitable access to intervention resources. Additionally, I think it's able to support children who would not otherwise be seen in clinic. So again, trying to close this gap that some families may experience in terms of trying to access appropriate research, care, and support.
So some of our main goals with Remaking Recess are increasing engagement. And by engagement, we mean how long and how often students are interacting with their peers, whether that's through a game, through conversations. We're also looking at how often our students are initiating to their peers, so asking them to play, engaging in a conversation with them, as well as how they're responding when the peers around them are asking them to play as well. We're also looking at students' social network and how friendship dynamics exist in their classrooms. We want to make sure that our students are in reciprocal friendships, and we have a well-defined version of friendship in that it's our students identifying peers in their classrooms as a friend, but their peers also identifying them as a friend as well. And the way we're doing that, again, is through this environmental rearrangement of recess. We're being really intentional, and we are having our paraprofessionals be really intentional with the games that are out on the yard and how recess is set up so that students are able to get on the yard, go to recess, and get engaged really quickly and stay engaged throughout all of recess and maintain that engagement through the classroom as well. So the main reason that we're looking at engagement and really trying to increase how long students are engaged and how often they're engaged is because the more they're engaged, the more opportunities they have to make and to keep these friendships. Friendships are predictive of positive school outcomes. Students are more motivated to go to school, they have less conflict and higher academic achievement. And although it's hard to intervene on friendship itself, we found that interventions like Remaking Recess have had success when it comes to things like engagement and increasing how long students are engaged, as well as those opportunities to make friendships. So we really want to emphasize that engagement piece. And again, schools we found have been a really important context to promote these skills, and school is where students are. We want to make sure that we're meeting students where they are and giving them opportunities to practice these skills as they go into recess throughout the day. And again, recess is a really important factor when it comes to social success. And again, we really want to make sure that students are learning these skills in the context where they're going to use it. So if paraprofessionals are able to implement these strategies on Monday and Tuesday, we want students to be able to practice these skills Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and as they continue through the day and through the week in school. So with the increased use of this intervention, we also want to increase those positive outcomes for our students as well. So when talking about our students, the main demographic and population that we've done Remaking Recess with are students who are fully included in their gen ed classroom. So students who are in at least 51% inclusion in gen ed and in recess with gen ed students. We've looked at elementary school students. So these are kids in kindergarten up to around 5th grade. And again, we're really looking at students who have who just need more support when it comes to this unstructured time at recess. So some of these students might be able to engage and do really well in the classroom in a more structured environment, but when it comes to recess and that less structured time, we want to provide that support.
Cool. So Remaking Recess is a targeted intervention. So we're really looking to improve social engagement and social interactions. But the coolest thing about this intervention is that it is flexible. We're able to use this across a slew of different schools. And part of that requires a few different aspects of the intervention. So first is assessment. When we're using these different strategies and when we're trying different strategies with these paraprofessionals at the school, we want to make sure that it's having some impact on child outcomes. And we have very direct and objective assessment of how kids are doing so that we're able to tailor these strategies and making sure that each kid is benefiting as much as they can. Of course, it's out there on the yard. It can be quite rambunctious. They're kids, of course, so conflict mediation is something that we emphasize quite a bit throughout all the modules in our manual. Communication and social engagement. These two factors are really the crux of what Remaking Recess is all about. It is a psychosocial intervention, so we are trying to improve these two aspects. And as Beza said, we are able to do that, and those things do actually predict later friendships. And lastly, flexibility, of course. We're working with kiddos on the spectrum. We're talking about interpersonal relationships and social engagement. So this is something that does permeate through all the modules in our manual as well. Cool. So a little bit of data here. We gave you an idea of what it is, kind of what it entails, whom it's intended for. And the best thing about all of it is that we've seen that it works. So I'll go through these pretty quickly. The graph on the left is actually from our pilot study that we did here at, with schools around Los Angeles. The outcome we're looking at here is engagement. So I mentioned before, we have a very specific, direct and observational measure that we use called the playground observation of peer engagement. So we're able to see exactly how kids are interacting with each other out on the yard in their natural environment, and we're able to quantify that. So what we see here is that from entry to exit, those who received Remaking Recess, they're able to spend more time engaged with their peers. In the graph on the left, this is from our multi-site study. So this is our other main outcome that we're looking at. It's from our social network, or from our friendship survey, we call it. We give kiddos these questionnaires that ask them questions about who they like to play with and who they see playing with each other. From this information, we're able to create these really cool webs and concept maps of the friendships in the class and kind of how that dynamic looks like visually. What the coolest thing I think about this graph is that effects are sustained in follow-up. So even after coaching ends with Remaking Recess and we go back and we check to see how things are going, we see that in the Remaking Recess group, the social network salience or their connectedness in the class is still fairly high and significantly different and more robust than those who got the waitlist treatment. So a pretty cool effect. This is an example of the social network from the data that we have and how we can visually depict it. These are fake names, so HIPAA don't come for me. We're able to classify kiddos with certain, how they're connected to the class. We can track Johnny quickly as a quick example, but we would see that he's secondary in this baseline social network. So involved in the social network a little bit, but not the most nominated. So some reciprocal friendships, but maybe not as much as a nuclear friend group. And we're able to see at exit, we're able to bump them up through remaking recess. So we can attribute all this change to remaking recess because we control all the other variables. But that's a really neat consequence of remaking recess as an intervention, is that we're able to see objectively what's happening on the yard, and then also corroborate through perceptions and child level perceptions of what's happening in the classroom as well. And this kind of ties back to what that graph was saying. These effects were also sustained into follow-up, which is especially great. Cool, so that really encompasses what remaking recess is. And we have a quick little example of what it looks like. So this was from one of our summer programs, summer schools that we were working at. We actually got consent from the school to film there, and we were able to capture the principal actually who was interested in learning remaking recess. And this is a short 2-minute clip of his using our strategies. Cool. So as you can see, the goal really is to help create a more inclusive environment out on the yard so that everyone has an opportunity to engage socially. And that is it for us. Thank you guys so much. You can visit our website. If you guys have any questions, of course, our emails are probably somewhere on the ARB website as well, and you feel free to reach out as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy and Besa. I think we're ready for the teacher session now. Connie?
We are, but the teachers are going to come on at 11, so we have a couple of minutes.
Oh, a couple of minutes.
And actually, well, we have one teacher on, but not the others, because teachers are teaching in their school right now, but they'll come on at 11. One of the kind of interesting things is that Remaking Recess is at the school that the teacher panel, our teachers are also at. And so Remaking Recess is located in different schools around Los Angeles. And so if you have questions at the end of the teacher panel, maybe we'll have some questions for Remaking Recess of teachers or Andy and Besa. Let's see. So we so far have Caitlin on the call or on the webinar. One of the questions that came up was around sort of getting some of these programs, maybe like Remaking Recess. If your child doesn't have it at their school, are there other settings that we could actually implement this kind of intervention? Do you guys have thoughts about that, Besa and Andy?
Sorry, could you repeat that, Connie?
If we don't have Remaking Recess at the school, but where else are children? Where else could we implement Remaking Recess?
It's a good question. So much of what happens on the yard are games. So, potentially organized sports that are happening, whether that's, a part of a team or a play date, right? I think we can embed these principles in pretty mundane environments as well, in my opinion.
Yeah. So boys and girls clubs or YMCA programs or camp programs. There's also, I think, some strategies that might be applicable to what parents would do with their children at home.
Exactly.
As well. So just even having a play date and thinking about how do you get kids engaged around the same activity. And I don't know, Caitlin, you're our facilitator in training at CWC West. Maybe you have some thoughts.
Yeah, I just saw Sarissa Brown in the question and answer asking a question about how do we navigate and make these ideas a reality when there's a shortage of teacher staffing. And that's something that we are dealing with at our school as well. And it's really tricky. It's something that's happening across Los Angeles. I think, we're trying to create systems and structures that help us because that shortage is, bleeding into every part of students' educational day, including, implementing a program like Remaking Recess. So I don't necessarily have the magic bullet answer, but I think, we're just continuing to try and be novel with how we set up our systems and structures.
And those extend to playgrounds. So one of the interesting things that happens at schools is that teachers tend not to be on the playground. They are these paraprofessional assistants. And so I think one of the advantages, of course, is when the paraprofessionals are considered part of the team. And there's a lot of communication between teachers and paraprofessionals. So trying to understand a child's sort of social needs in the classroom, but also on the playground. And if we can somehow bridge that gap in training, that makes a difference. And I think that's what you guys are trying to do at CWC. Charter school, correct?
Yeah, we are.
So let's see, we have three of the teachers I think are on. We're waiting for one more, but thank you, Andy and Beza, and we'll see you afterwards. Maybe there'll be more questions for you. Let's see, we have Paola and Chris and Katie and Quinn we're waiting for. And I recognize that this is in the middle of your teaching day. So we so appreciate that your principal allowed you to join us today. And you're probably trying to find kind of a quiet place at school if you're at school, right? So I see Chris, who looks like you're outside. Hi, let's see, Paola's here. And one more, Quinn, is coming. So let me get started so we don't completely run out of time. But we are very fortunate today that we have a teacher panel from Citizens of the World West Valley Charter. And as I said, they are in school right now. But we have with us today Chris Carpina, who is a first grade lead teacher. He's a first generation Filipino American. He holds a preliminary multi-subject teaching credential, and he's worked in the education field for the past 12 years and is a founding staff member at CWC West Valley. So welcome, Chris. We also have Caitlin McCracken, who is the education specialist teacher, what we used to call special education teachers. She's been working with young children for 10 years. She's worked at UCLA in research labs, testing interventions for autistic children for several years before she went back for her master's degree in special education She's also finishing her BCBA certification. And she's been at CWC for the last 3 years. And let's see, Paola Santiago is here.
It's Paola.
It's Paola.
Yeah.
Know that I mispronounce all names. Sorry, Paola. She's a transitional kindergarten lead teacher. She's taught TK first grade for the last 9 years, and she identifies as neurodivergent herself. And so she's familiar with the highs and lows of school for students, parents, and teachers. So very valuable member of the teaching team. We also have Quinn Tran, who's a kindergarten lead teacher. I'm not sure if she's on yet, but she'll come on. She's the founding lead teacher at CWC West Valley. She has over 18 years of teaching experience in primary and secondary grades. She has a master's degree in teacher leadership. She also holds a multiple subject teaching credential and is a national board certified teacher. So really thrilled to have all of our teachers with us today. So I'm going to ask you all some questions. So CWC is a very unique charter school in the system. It's a full inclusion school. You guys have several neurodivergent children in each of your classes, right? So when you think about your classroom, what kinds of skills in elementary school do you feel are necessary for your children to be successful in the grade that you teach? So particularly your neurodivergent children, but I'm sure you're thinking of all of the students in your class. So who wants to start?
For TK, some of the kind of beginning self-regulation skills is always really helpful. Just learning how to stop and take deep breaths is really probably the most important when you're 4 and 5 years old entering the school, where there are a lot of sensory input. It's very loud and there's lots of children, familiar and unfamiliar smells. And just that one skill will totally have a huge impact, just learning to take deep breaths and slow down.
Good advice. Chris, do you have?
So I guess in the first grade classroom, obviously that's when we get a little bit more on the instructional side versus also because in kindergarten, they're definitely learning how to be students in a school, while first grade, that first introduction into the instructional side of things. So I think it definitely takes, again, like what Paula said, also patience. So kind of navigating the strong feelings that they're experiencing. But I also believe that building connection is also really important too. So building on their interests. So maybe this student particularly like this kind of book genres, or this student particularly like this kind of game. So just kind of noticing those interests and tying into the day. You see a spark in their eyes. They're like, oh, I'm ready to learn. I know all about that. I'm ready to go. So just kind of understanding, learning about them, and really talking to them really makes a big difference too.
Great. Katie, what do you think about because you have quite a few on your caseload of kids with autism in particular.
Yeah, I mean, I think, each individual student is so different. So it's hard to say there's one particular thing that's needed. I think the self-regulation and then also Chris and Paola both do a really good job of just making sure that, everyone's included in their classroom. I think just some of the basic kindergarten readiness skills apply to our students that are neurodivergent too. So things like following directions, imitation and observational learning, being able to play on their own and also collaboratively. Those are all things that I think are important both in TK kindergarten and even first grade. And that really helps, set students up for success.
Okay. So, I'm kind of curious. So some of you have identified as neurodivergent yourself. And so if you think about your own your own teaching and how that might be influenced by your own educational journey, I don't know if it has, but are there things that you can think about from your experience as a learning difference or neurodivergence that helps you in reaching kids that are also neurodivergent?
When I was a kid, it looked like I wasn't paying any attention. I would read a lot under my desk to, do my thing, but I was listening and I paid attention, and I would answer questions when I was called on. This would have to be like in 5th grade and beyond. But as a teacher, I realized and recognized that kids do pay attention in different ways. My way as a child of paying attention was to look at a book, but I can still hear, and I was processing everything I was hearing. For the kids in my class, I come with the understanding that sitting up straight, facing forward, and eyes on me isn't always the way a child will stay focused. Some kids need to lie down, and that's okay. Some kids need to like fidget with something, and that's okay. And providing, I think, options for that aren't sit up straight, look at me, pay attention in that way is I learned that from firsthand experience.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because don't teachers always say, sit up straight, look at me, eyes on me? Right. And that's just not so helpful to every student. Interesting. Chris or Katie?
Yeah, so I'm also classified as neurodivergent myself. So growing up with Asperger's syndrome since I was like 4 years old, like diagnosed with it. So definitely have that same pressure of like the social aspect of it, just kind of keeping to myself. I didn't really talk to anyone until I was like 5 years old. Even during school time, I just kind of kept to myself. And like I would have like adults really prompt me like what to do, because I just wasn't sure what we're supposed to do socially. So I guess growing up and kind of using my experience in my own teaching style, I also believe in the flexible style of teaching. So especially in group work, because I understand where sometimes kids feel more comfortable working by themselves, or kids feel more comfortable working with partners. So anytime I send them off to go work independently, it's like I give them the option to like whether link up with a partner that they will like, or work on their own. And even just those who are like really just kind of feeling like they're all on their own, I always also make sure to check in on them, like, oh, so how are you doing? And just kind of like just talking to them. I think that socially kids don't really get a chance to talk a lot, just because it's always instructional, go, go, go. Listen to what the teacher says versus, oh, let me learn about you and like how can I help you as a student in your own style? Like how can I help you, support you, basically, so both socially and instructionally. So I guess I just like flexibility and not setting a high expectation where they feel the pressure of learning in school, because I always believe like just show me, like as long as you're doing your best and you're showing me what you can do, you're good with me.
That's great. And I see Quinn is coming on now. Hi, Quinn. Sorry, I know
Hi,
that.
I am so sorry.
No problem. You're teaching. I get it. You're teaching. So it's, things don't always line up. We were just talking about, I was curious if you identify as having a different learning style yourself, or you're neurodivergent, and whether or not that and your own kind of journey through education. I mean, all of us have gone through schools, right? Or schooling, and how that influences your teaching now as a teacher, if it does.
So growing up, I was an English learner. My parents were refugees. And so when they came to the States, they did not know the English language. And even though I was born in the States, I did not get the home support that I needed to be fluent in English. And so I struggled as a child. And then not only that, I had a speech impediment where I started speaking later as a child. So I didn't start speaking and talking until I was 2. And so I know with my speech, I tend to substitute sounds. And so it was a struggle for me just because learning phonics and learning words was something that I struggled as a child.
Yeah. So how does that make you kind of think about your classroom and how you teach then?
So when working with students, I know that one thing I do is really pay attention to how they speak. And I notice if they're producing sounds correctly or not. And then not only that, I am an advocate for English learners. And so I use a lot of English language development in my class, where I help my students to develop the language that they need to achieve as a learner.
Yeah, it's great. And then of course, Katie, you have kids with all kinds of different kinds of learning styles, and you're trying to integrate them into any of these teachers' classrooms, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that all of our teachers at our school do a really good job of, being flexible and really trying to work with each individual student, regardless if they're neurodivergent or not. And you can tell just with, the 3 teachers here, they're doing a variety of different strategies to make sure that, each individual student feels like they're included and that they're, continuing to learn. So my job is easy because I feel like I get to work with, really special educators. So I think it's a little tricky sometimes because every, teacher is different. And so every classroom is different. And so that's, one of my jobs is to try and, know how a teacher teaches and how they set up their classroom and how best to support a student who is neurodivergent in that class.
Right. So you have to be doubly flexible with the teacher, with the classroom, with the kid, et cetera. Okay, so we just have a few minutes left, and I'm curious if you all have like recommendations for parents who wonder about the kinds of skills that their child needs to be successful in school. And if you could talk to parents and you could ask them or help them to prepare their student to come into your classroom, what would you say to them? What's a really important skill?
I would say for the parents to be open to trying as many things as they can, from like having headphones on in public spaces to using a Chewy, like whatever works for the child to cope with the newness and the sensory input that they're going to have at school. Just give it a try, be open with it. It doesn't look typical, but it's for your child to help them. For example, I as an adult, I'm trying to get more at ease with headphones in public spaces because I do get overwhelmed by noises and sounds. And I think it would be just very helpful at a younger and younger age for kids to have these options and know that they are available to them in school and in public. Just so the openness to try things.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that you're open in the classroom to having whatever the child needs to cope as well. So Quinn, how about?
Yes, so I think that communication between the teacher and the grown-ups is something very important, just because with our parents who support the children at home, they have strategies and they have interventions that they use to support their children. And so just by communicating with the teachers, we can actually support the students better in the classroom. Like, for example, I had a student years ago where she was very, how can I describe it? She did not like sounds. And so every loud noise would make her very anxious. And so one of the things that the mom communicated with me is a lot of times when we prime students ahead of time, it's easier for her to adapt to the environment. So for example, every time we had an assembly, I would prime her exactly what would happen in the assembly, why the students were clapping, and it supported her with, oh, I understand why they're clapping, because they're showing respect and they're showing that they appreciate the presenter. And then whenever there was like certain sounds, we would just say, oh, that's the bell that tells us it's time to go line up, or it's time to do certain things. And so the student adapted well in the classroom by just having us prime her ahead of time. I know some of the things I also do in the classroom with the students, and this could actually support the parents at home, is setting up routines. So giving them like steps for everything that they do. Like even when we have the students complete an assignment, we have them like first do this, second do this, third do that. And so it kind of translates at home with the parents, because they use the same strategies to support the students at home.
That's great. Yep. How about you, Chris? Are there things you want parents to work on?
I guess that for me, like it could go either way. Like either I believe growing up, like just my parents kind of like recognized the difference between basically just recognizing the glows and grows of things. So basically the glows, like, you know, recognizing like how they're doing in school, like, ooh, just checking in with, they're like, oh man, you did really great. But also recognizing the growth, like, oh, instead of saying, oh, you just can't do this, versus like, oh, we're definitely going to be working on this new strategy, because even just wording from like parents, teachers to kids can really make an impact on students. So just the verbiage of like, oh, so you're doing an awesome job, versus you're doing good, but how am I doing good? Like, oh, you're doing good by like, you definitely moved up on this new step, or like, I'm so glad that you learned this new thing. And then the growth is like, oh man, I know you didn't get it right the first time, but definitely we're going to work on this so we can definitely accomplish it next time. So it's just the verbiage from like, because even I would have kids who will tell me like, you just say good job all the time. I want to know what I'm doing good at. Like, oh, okay. So, and that just kind of builds confidence from there, because everything that we say, like, kids are taking it in. So and they'll remember that. I remember things that my teacher told me when I was younger. So it's just being intentional with the wording of the conversations you have with students and with kids, and just recognizing that as students.
Yeah. Thanks, Brandon. We don't need the key, because we got a few minutes for questions, so we're okay. Thanks, Chris. So being very specific in the praise. So when you say you're doing something good, you have to be specific so they know exactly what you're talking about. I think that's clear, consistent language is always helpful. I don't know, Katie, if you wanted to say anything about.
I mean, Quinn covered, communication with parents, which I think is also really valuable. I also think, especially in our model, communication with other teachers, right? So as a part of a student's IEP, they might have multiple service providers, multiple people providing services to help support them access the general education curriculum. And so I think one of the things that's also really important is just that collaboration between teachers, service providers, administrators, just so that we're all kind of working together to support a student's educational journey.
Right. You also have Remaking Recess at your school, so you are communicating with your paraprofessionals. And are the paraprofessionals at your school on the recess and in the classroom the same? So there's that transition between classroom or are they different on the playground?
No, they're in classrooms and on the yard. Okay. So they're in a variety of spaces, staff shortages, as we talked about in the beginning. So they're doing all kinds of different things.
Right. And again, it's that communication and that team approach. So some questions we're getting are, someone says, I love Quinn and her idea to communicate between teachers and parents and exchange ideas, but my school does not promote it. So how do you think, what are some strategies in which you guys are able to do this, and that maybe you can, transfer to parents so that they can ask their school to do something similar? Do you guys have for example, do you have built-in planning time together?
Yes, as a grade level, we do have a designated time each week where we get together to communicate with our grade level team. And then on a weekly basis, we meet with our school, like our teaching leadership team, where we have professional learning communities where we exchange ideas, and we also support each other with interventions that we need to support our student learners.
And you guys are always working towards kind of the evidence-based practices to the extent that we have evidence-based practices, right?
So we do use data to inform our decisions and our teaching.
Yeah, which is great. Other thoughts about any strategies that you can, I don't know, communicate to parents? So for example, someone's saying, you know, what behavior strategies are beneficial in reinforcing positive behavior from children who are scratching staff? Now, I'm sure this has never happened to you, right? No one has ever bit you, scratched you, hit you, right? But when that happens, right, because it happens with little kids, what do you do? What are your sort of line of strategies?
I was gonna, Paula, okay, good. Go ahead. I was about to say, you're the GK one, so go ahead.
So the strategies we use, behavioral strategies, benefit. So reinforcing positive behavior, just really constant praise is really helpful. It's like, oh, look at you playing and keeping your hands to yourself. Love that for you. And really being like, oh, you talked to me and you kept your hands to yourself. Thank you so much. And when it does happen, it's like, okay, let's review what we expect when you're at school. We call them, our school called, we call them the unicorns. So we can have unicorn expectations. So unicorns are safe, unicorns are kind. And in this case, scratching is not kind and it's not safe. What else can we do to help us communicate that we're upset or that we're angry? We can say, I need space. We can say, go to the calm corner and use a pop-it. And it's like redirecting the energy, because if they're angry or upset, they have that right to be angry and upset. It's teaching them what to do, explicitly teaching them what to do when those feelings do happen. And it might keep happening. It's very it's the age and it's the strategies that's most effective for them to scratch. And so just reinforcing, like, I know this works for you, but this hurts my body. So let's find you a way that doesn't hurt you or me.
Right. Someone else is asking about how do you support students who have severe intellectual disability and limited verbal abilities with social interactions within the classroom and the playground? And I know you have a variety of students at your school. I don't know, maybe this is a question more for Katie, I don't know.
Yeah, so I work with an inclusion teacher who looks over sort of more of the students that have multiple disabilities, including more limited language, and are typically on alternative curriculums. And we have a variety of different strategies that we use to try and include them in everything. So some of it might be like adaptive equipment, but also, you know, just setting up the expectations in our classrooms that every you know, student is a part of the classroom. And so a lot of our students, like, for example, will push one of our students in their adaptive trach on the yard. They might position that particular student by the playground because she likes watching the students go up and down on the monkey bars. We also make sure that we're using a variety of multimodal communication for those students. So they have speech generating devices, but they also have low-tech options, can use a variety of means of communication. And we're providing that, across not only in the classroom, but, during recess and lunch as well. So they're able to communicate in a variety of ways. We've also done a lot of social emotional lessons on differences for everyone, right? So looking at racial and ethnicity differences, cultural differences, as well as neurodiversity. And so a lot of the students, if not all of them, have had lessons about, the particular speech generating devices that those students use. So they know that that's their primary mode of communication.
Great. So last comment is that someone's asking if an autistic child picks up more stressful behaviors at school, would it be good to remove the child? And I bet your answer is no, because you're going to work through that, right? You're going to make sure that everyone's going to have success. I see all the teachers going, yes, yes, yes. And we are now really out of time, and I promised you all I would only keep you 30 minutes. So I'm going to let the teachers go back to doing their jobs, which, we are so thankful for you because you are examples of excellent teachers. We all want our children to be with excellent teachers. So thank you so much for participating. Thanks. Bye.
All right. So now we're going to move on to the school age resource session. Before we do that, in the Q&A, our panelists and Connie, if you see that if there have been unanswered questions that maybe you can answer, please feel free to type in your responses. And now we are going to watch a video provided by the Learning Rights Law Center.
The goal of Learning Rights Law Center is quite simple: to provide children with disabilities the same opportunity for education as those students who do not have a disability. Unfortunately, for many children with disabilities, the ability to obtain a free and appropriate public education is blocked by numerous barriers. These barriers include extreme poverty, language, gender, and race. Learning Rights Law Center partners with each family in their pursuit of education. We make sure that every client receives necessary services, support, and proper placements that meet their needs, improve their educational outcomes, and improve the quality of life for themselves and their families. Qualified low-income families approaching Learning Rights for help are met with compassionate and culturally appropriate advocates who carefully listen to their story and help them in the best way. Common problems include improper evaluations, a school's inability to follow through on an established individual education plan, bullying, expulsions without due process, and discriminatory treatment due to race, gender, sexual orientation, or health. Every family is assessed and provided with an individualized action plan tailored specifically for them. There is no cost for these vulnerable families. When a situation is extremely complicated, Learning Rights will provide direct legal representation to the family. Learning Rights believes that with the right skill set, parents can learn to be their child's best advocate. Our Tiger program is an award-winning, hands-on, self-advocacy school year-long program that provides the tools for best parent advocacy. Our Parent Tiger graduates form essential support groups and collectively work to bring about social change within the education system. Learning Rights Law Center is a beacon of hope for impoverished families with special needs children who have nowhere else to turn. In the words of a son of Tiger parents, "Thank you to Learning Rights for giving my parents the tools and knowledge to fight for my rights. I know it is not easy. Learning Rights never gives up. Because of Learning Rights, my life is better." Learning Rights Law Center, envisioning a world in which all children grow into happy, productive, and independent adults.
Now, finally, from school age, we will go to transition into adulthood. Aziza, would you like to introduce our next guest speaker?
I'm very happy to do just that. Thank you very much. So I'm hoping everybody is having as enriched morning as I am. This has been so wonderful. Our next guest is Dr. James Kuntz, who is the coordinator of moderate severe instruction in the Division of Special Education for the Los Angeles Unified School District. His previous roles include in-home play facilitation for students with autism, teaching an autism program in middle school, and working with students and staff in high schools and career and transition centers. Today, he will discuss the importance and outcomes of work-based learning. So please meet and enjoy Dr. James Kuntz.
Hi, good morning, everybody. It's good to be with you here today. I'll get my screen share going so that we can get this started. And it's going to be a little more than work-based learning. It's going to also include a little bit about self-determination, because those skills certainly do lead into a great work-based learning or work experience. But before I get going too far in, I want to start with a little bit of levity, not too much, but I like to have fun while I do my work, even though I'm very serious about it. So today is all about transition, and I wanted to share some quotes about the importance of preparation, just to bring it back to how important preparing is for all of our students for their success. This is a pretty common, well-known quote: by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. And some people attribute that to Benjamin Franklin, but we know it's been said by many. Another good preparation quote: I don't believe in luck, I believe in preparation. And that was by Bobby Knight, a basketball coach of fame. But I think the best one I'd want to leave you with here is that the best preparation for good work tomorrow is to do good work today. And there are many variations of this quote about preparing for life, preparing for a goal. One of them is by Mr. Bruce Lee, of course. So we're here to talk about preparing for that transition. And not that it's the last transition that a student will go through, but it is a pretty big one when you transition from the school system into adult living. There are supports that follow, but the school district supports do end at that point. So we want to make sure that when we think about transition, we're thinking about the student the whole way through, but then when we get to the end, the big T transition is what I'll be focusing on. Of course, it's such a big topic, you know, this word transition, and it should begin early. And if it's not early for you, that's okay. Get started now. Get started as soon as you can. If it hasn't been on the front of your mind previously, there's no better time than today to start weaving those threads together to ensure success throughout the life of your child. In each meeting with a school or a teacher or a service provider or an agency, one broad question to ask is, how does this, or what can I do to make my child better prepared for their adult life? You know, every experience is an opportunity. As other presenters shared today, there are lots of points at which we will be considering transition for people with autism throughout their lifespan. Entering school in those early years and thinking about all those interactions they can have and that we can support as they grow those communication and interpersonal, social, emotional skills as young ones, and even as they grow older. As mentioned earlier, I was a middle school teacher, and we didn't stop working on those skills in middle school. We were honing them, because that's adolescence is a very important time to really explicitly focus on those skills that will lead to lifelong success. So again, every experience is an opportunity. And of course, make a plan. The plan is not set in stone. We make great plans for our children and for ourselves, and we have to give ourselves the grace to change them, to adjust them along the way, because what we know does change. And so that plan is certainly amendable. You know, early elementary, middle school to high school, those are standard transitions. We talk about them quite often. But today, again, I'm going to focus on the post-secondary education and or employment transition and how we support that in schools. It shouldn't be a big or a shocking moment for a student or a family that the special education service will be ending at the end of school because we should be preparing them along the way. And I'll talk a little more about that on the next slide. But it's one of those things that will teach the academic and social and other skills all of these years, with the end goal being that a student becomes someone who goes on to more education or more employment. And of course, we encourage independent living as well. One of the ways that schools ensure that we discuss about transition for students with IEPs especially is that we develop individual transition plans. And that is a part of IDEA. It's required that we develop ITPs at 16. In LAUSD, and well, I'll say this first. In LAUSD, we started at 14, and there is some movement in the state to change the state to be 14 as well, so that IEP teams at each meeting from 14 on in LAUSD already discuss the goal, the end goal after high school of what a student will do for education, for employment, and independent living. And those conversations all along the way, again, like I said earlier, that plan may change, that goal may change based upon what a student expresses or learns, or their interests change, but it also may not. And it's our job in school to make sure we address those needs all along the way, that we build on the skills in classes, in their academic classes, and then we also provide the supports and services that are needed to make sure that they can reach their goal after they leave us. One of those things that certainly helps to improve the outcomes for our students is focusing on self-determination. And a lot of the skills that were mentioned by other presenters today, a lot of the things that the programs that were mentioned and the supports, in the end, their goal is self-determination. The things you do at an early age, at a middle school age, or at a high school age, are all building to this idea of self-determined individuals, people who are self-aware, who know about themselves and can describe themselves and can then use that knowledge to advocate for themselves, to share with peers, teachers, and coworkers in the end about what they might need to be successful, about what they might need to help themselves regulate, to help themselves to, again, be successful in any environment that follows. One of the goals of self-determination is also communication. Communication skills are so pivotal for students, whether they use their voice or they use a device or they use gestures or sign or any of the possible communication modes. Being able to communicate is a key factor in self-determination and being able to tell people what you want to do. And that's why choice making is so important, and why we'll continue to focus on choice making throughout the lifespan of a student. And the choices change. When you're in elementary school, of course, what would you like for a snack is a choice, right? But when you get older, what would you like to study? What elective would you like to take? What kind of location would you like your work experience in? Those things, those choices, the little choices early on, help students to learn to make bigger choices in a more informed way later on, and also to share about those choices and why. Problem solving is an essential part of self-determination, because the whole point is that people are more independent. Not completely independent if they can't be. We want the most independence for students as possible, but being able to look at a situation and identify what might have gone wrong, and then ask for help, that going back to self-advocacy, self-awareness, communication, it all builds together. And they're all important skills to have. Another key area of self-determination is future planning. And so that's why we would focus on that in the transition plan. That future planning is so important, and having a future focus. One of the key terms in recent years in schools is creating lifelong learners. And even if you're not going to go to school after you're done with school, you're still learning. You learn on the job, you learn in your community, you learn in every experience. And That's why every experience is an opportunity for our students to gain something and for us to help them to use that experience to learn. So higher levels of self-determination will most definitely lead to higher levels of success in adult living, because adult life is about those skills. Being a successful adult is about those skills. And so the other focus of this presentation is about work experience, and that is where kind of all of those skills, those self-determination skills and all of the other academic skills and transition skills that are taught in school can come together. They're like a culminating activity almost for a lot of students. And the reason that we support work experience in LAUSD, and other school districts do too, we're not the only ones, obviously, is because we know that it provides that culminating activity, that experience that makes students more likely to be hired, that helps them be more likely to keep their job when they get one, and to be more confident in the workplace. The goal for our students is competitive, integrated employment, not a workshop where there's a bunch of other people with disabilities too, but in a business, in a more natural ratio of people with disabilities, in a local business, in a community business, in an agency or nonprofit, something they can travel to on their own, in a place where other people would also be hired to do that work too. That's competitive, integrated employment. When we talk about work experience in LAUSD, we think about several different options. One is volunteering. That can be work experience for a start. An internship could be paid or unpaid, and that can be a start. And then we also have paid work experiences. And the funding sources on the right are just a sample. We have the state that funds Workability One in schools, and we use those funds to support our work experience programs. We have Department of Rehabilitation partnerships, DOR partnerships, through Transition Partnership Program and We Can Work, that fund work experience for our students. And there are other funding sources too outside of school districts. Students can sign up for DOR work experience without even going through a school district as well. They can have something that's a little more intense that more likely leads to a job in the same place, called a paid internship program experience through a regional center. And so in those places, students earn an hourly wage for their time worked. That's the other goal of this, that we don't accept sub-minimum wage anymore for our students who are doing the same work as other people, and they should be getting the same pay. Sometimes work experience is on a campus, it's at a school, because maybe a student isn't quite ready to be out in the community on that work experience, can't travel to that location, maybe needs a little more support than a business would be able to provide. And so a first experience on campus is a great way in to practicing those skills and treating it like work. But then we'd always want to try to get a student to a local business or a nonprofit or another location where other people are being hired to do the same work. So when thinking about a work experience, and you might want to think about, what are your students' interests, right? What's your child interested in? What's their possible job in the future? If they're interested in something very specific, guess what? There is probably a job out there that is that specific in that interest. It may need to be expanded a little. We may need to find a way to bridge that interest to another job, to another place of work. But there are lots of businesses, there are lots of jobs in this world that are not the standard police officer, fireman, doctor, teacher. You know, there are so many, there's so much more depth in our world of employment and so many more opportunities. Another thing I make sure that my staff asks is, what's near the student's home? What is possible for them to get to on their own without us having to facilitate some way for them to get there that won't be there when they leave our schools? Finding a job in the neighborhood or within one bus route would be a great goal for most students. Sometimes it takes transferring, sometimes it takes riding multiple modes of transportation or using access in the end. But if we can find a work experience close to home, that's gonna be the best one for a student usually. And then what skills are needed in that work environment, and how do we got to think about those skills and working on them and training students to use them, not the technical skills all the time, because we don't have access to those usually in schools, but the soft skills, the generalizable skills about communication. Oh, I'll talk about those on the next slide. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, sorry. And then lastly, what supports are needed? A job coach is often available, but not all the time. Job coaching is meant to help students get started, to learn the job roles, and then to check in on them over time. It's a phased support, not a 100% full-time support for the entirety of a work experience or job. So when you're talking about those skills, like I said, that you need for work experience, communication skills are key. And mostly it's being able to present yourself in an interview. It doesn't have to go perfectly, but you have to be able to express what you know about yourself. Go back to self-determination, right? Not oversharing, but sharing enough that the employer would want to hire you, but also with coworkers. So those interpersonal relationships in school translate to how we interact in the workplace. And the workplace is a place where you have to follow the rules or you may lose your job, right? Following directions is a key means to prepare for work experience as well. And then those expected workplace behaviors, the behaviors that it takes to be a good employee. One way to prepare for that in school is something called community-based instruction. And community-based instruction is often a class or a small group of students going out together, participating in activities in the neighborhood around a school. You'd practice independent travel and how to get to businesses and what goes on in them, and learning about the things in that community and how to travel, again, like I said, and communicate in the community safely. Those are really key skills that should be worked on in middle and high school if they're not already, so that students are prepared for that final transition out of our school system. I believe my time is almost up, but I do want to share, oh, perfect timing. I do want to share that in LAUSD, if you have more questions about transition, you can visit our webpage. It's here on the screen. I can always be contacted as well if you have follow-up questions. So I believe that is my time.
That was perfect timing. Thank you, James. That was really great. We might need you again for the Q&A with speakers later around 12:10 if there are questions, and also feel free to continue to type in your responses in the Q&A. And now we're going to move into the second part of transition to adulthood. We have our self-advocates panel, and Aziza is going to introduce our moderator.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Kuntz. So beneficial and instructive. So I'd like to introduce our next two speakers. Robin Shipley. Hold on, I'm so very sorry. My paperwork has just fallen away. And Robin Morgan. I'm sorry. Yes. There we go. Something is going on here with my paperwork. Please forgive me. There you go. Sonia Dixon and Robin Shipley. There we go. Got too many papers I'm looking at. They're co-founders of Transitions Consulting, which offers an employment and career soft skills training program called Evolve into the workplace for young adults with neurodiversities. They will moderate this, I'm sorry. There we go. And so you will moderate a session with your self-advocates panels. Self-advocates panel. There we go. All right. That was a little bumpy, but again, Robin Shipley.
Hi, everybody. I'm Robin Shipley. Sonia Dixon, who I'm partners with in Transitions Consulting, will not be with us today, so I'll be moderating the panel. Shall we Shall we start, Sue?
Yes, please go ahead.
All right, beautiful. So we're really, really fortunate today. We have three amazing self-advocates, panelists. We have Colin Harris, and do you want to turn your camera on? We have Morgan Link and Catherine Figueroa. There we go. Beautiful, Kath. I think she's there. Yeah. If you can turn your, do you want to go ahead and Kath, turn your camera on? We have her. I did want to say that Colin, we wanted full disclosure that Colin is actually on the road, which is amazing that he is open to doing this with us. So if there's a disruption in his camera or audio, we will just make do. All right, does that sound good? So the advocates are, I'm going to just introduce questions to them. They've been really thoughtful in thinking about their answers. And then I'm gonna just, facilitate their amazing conversation. So I'd love to start with our first question. I don't see Catherine on. So she will probably be joining us shortly. Morgan and Colin, I'm gonna start with you guys for this first question. So we're really looking at the transition from high school, right, into college and into employment. So Colin, if you think about what skills that you actually developed in high school that you feel helped you manage the transition to college, what would you say were the ones that really stuck out for you?
For me, the number one thing I will say that number one skill I'd say I developed is, for lack of better words, the skill of confidence. And what I mean by that is kind of just having the confidence to go for something, even if like it makes you nervous. So like whether that be like me when it comes to joining a program or like taking a test or really just like meeting people. I can get nervous really easily and anxious very easily. But if I just like, trust myself and just like fully go for it without like any second thoughts, just like dive right into it. Usually it has always worked out very well. So that's kind of how I approach this transition into college. Just like diving headfirst into it, learning as I go and navigating, trying not to wallow too much in the anxiety, so to speak, because it's an entirely different world. So just going through it, right, just the gate, trusting in myself completely, and just not allowing like the anxiety to overtake me. It really helps me like get a nice kickstart. And of course, I'm gonna make mistakes throughout this college journey, like starting off, but like that's a part of the process, and just like understanding that as I'm just like going straight into it is definitely something that like I learned a lot, like going into high school, like coming from high school. So just being able to recognize that right before going into college is something that's definitely helped out a lot. That's
beautiful. You talked so much about self-awareness. You talked about recognizing and being so brave, Colin, to acknowledge the anxiety, because it's such a real thing. Hi, Kath. You're awesome. You're totally perfectly on time. We're doing the first question. I'm going to go turn it over to Morgan and give you a chance to breathe. Okay. All right, Morgan, what skills in high school helped you?
Well, one of the big differences is when I was going through high school, there wasn't much of a transition program at all. In fact, when I went through high school, what I have wasn't even considered autism yet. It would be considered autism a couple years after I left high school. At the time, it was some complicated subterm in the book somewhere. So there was very little support when it came to transitioning. And there was a definite feeling of sort of sort of getting the floor pulled out from under me, kind of, where there just wasn't support anymore going out of high school. So there's certainly skills I'd like to have developed, but I can't think of a lot of them right now.
Okay, no, it's very real, Morgan. Thank you. Right. Kath, do you want to answer that in terms of, what skills did you develop in high school that helped you transition into your job?
For context, similar to Morgan, I currently have a lot more skills I've developed since and have supports like Evolve now that I didn't have in high school. In fact, I actually struggled a lot in high school without them, and I didn't have my diagnosis of autism at that point and kind of fell through the cracks. Really what I did was just perform enough to go under the radar of teachers and counselors, but then I didn't receive any of the outside help I needed and really had no plans for the future. Still, there were a few useful skills I had to develop and maintain on my own in high school that helped me through that time that I still use now. Big one was note taking and recording. I took a copious amount of notes and recorded everything I heard, so that even if I didn't understand it in the moment, I could reevaluate it later. Just being able to process information later when I'm in a better space or headspace to be better able to understand it helps a great deal, and is how I most effectively learn. For example, sometimes what I call like a mental freezing event for me is when I have become confused about something being explained to me in real time. I'll be nodding my head, but I'll have completely lost the plot because my brain is still stuck on like 5 sentences prior to what someone has told me and is trying to make sense of it and just giving out like a red alert that it stopped understanding. So being able to record and having access to that information I was given but couldn't process at the time, but can fully take in later, is huge for me. The second one, this will sound strange that I'm calling it a skill, but reapplying my anxious energy was another thing I learned, basically turning anxiety into a motivator instead of a demotivator. So having a lot of anxiety can also be a sort of energy, but the difference between it being motivating or demotivating for me is how I use it. So instead of having it always shut me down, I would put it towards something positive, like getting work done. So let's say in high school, I was anxious about homework, then I'll feel better once it is done. If I'm anxious about class, then I'll make it a habit to wake up 2 hours in advance just to make it on time. But it essentially during that time, it was me kind of learning if I have to live with strong anxiety on a daily basis, I might as well also use it towards something positive for myself as a motivator.
Beautiful. I mean, you talk, all three of you, it's that having that self-awareness, right? You figured out what you needed. Yes, the supports, obviously that's where we want to go, but that's great. Okay, Kath, I'm picking on you again. Okay, so what skills do you use in your job now that you feel are, these are your must-haves, your essentials before entering into employment?
Full stop, definitely time management. Gotta have those alarms, reminders, calendars. You need a set system in place so you attend work on time, go to all your meetings, and you don't miss any important information that takes place during those times. The second thing would also be organization, digitally and physically. Keep lists and have organized physical space really helps me keep productive and be on top of things. Many times I also have to reference older materials or projects I worked on, and I need an organized system to find them. So keeping a tidy workspace also helps keep me focused as well. A third would be oral and written communication skills. Being on top of responding to others, asking for clarification when you need it. Sometimes that means having templates ready for emails and things you will always need from a conversation. For example, I'll always want a deadline when I'm given a project or the task priority level. You'll also need to communicate and reach out to your support systems. when you're working to fully utilize them and get the help and accommodations you need. For a fourth skill would also be anxiety management and self-care. While having the technical skills for a task is great, you also need the adequate mental and physical state to actually perform them, which means managing my anxiety and stress for me. And that requires me being self-aware of where I'm currently at, prepared with a coping strategy to address my current emotions, and redeveloping or adding new strategies on continuing forward. Likewise, relatedly for self-care, if you don't have your own body systems running well, you can't expect to perform at your best or give good results. It's simple, but eating right and sleeping well and practicing mindfulness is a big deal as well.
So that was so eloquent and so beautifully put, but I want everyone to understand that, I've had the honor of being a part of Catherine's journey. And all of these are skills that you've developed along the way. Same with you, Morgan. And Colin, I haven't had the pleasure, but I imagine that it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work and supports. So you didn't come out knowing all of this. This has been a process, right? Beautiful. Morgan, college. I'm going to ask you about your past college experience in knowing what you know now. What would have helped you to be more productive in college when you were there?
Certainly college was very difficult for me. I did not finish it. It was when I first realized how important that support system was, because it suddenly wasn't there anymore. Previously, it had been like high school supports, parents, therapists. And then, it's a new town, so no therapist, parents are far away. Without that support, things sort of fell apart for me. And there's so many different skills and situations that come up that being able to draw on people in your life to get help and support is so incredibly important, and wasn't something I knew at the time. Now, of course, I've been trying to build sort of a support system with Robin, Evolve, mentors, and other people at my work. And also just like the regional center services, insurance, things like that, are all powerful tools that you can use to try and leverage when you don't have the skills, or try and learn the skills that you need when they come up. So it's a very sort of a fundamental thing, and you don't want to find yourself sort of fighting for support when you're in the thick of it. You want to have it pre-built, ready to go when you need it.
Yeah, so key, so key. So Colin, you're there, right? You're in college. So what do you use to manage your social and academic life in school?
Well, approaching this question it was always a bit difficult for me to answer, because I'm currently learning how to do this as we speak. But something that has most recently just been worked very well for me is surrounding yourself with people who have aligning goals, who have the same aligning goals as you. And what that can mean is just I give an example. I'm an engineer major who's also on the track team, hence me being in the car right now. And if I'm able to surround myself with those who are also on sports teams, whether it's the same team or a different team, and is also majoring in a difficult major, surrounding yourself with those kinds of people and is very great, because you get both that social and academic aspect of it, as you're able to communicate with them, and you're also able to help each other out, navigate, because it's all a learning process for us. That's just has worked wonderfully for me. And it doesn't have to be all in the same thing. You can also be if you have a very specific goal and a specific aspect of life, surrounding yourself with people who have similar goals or aligning goals is great. It's allowed me to be more open, because really the hardest part is finding those people, because I'm growing up with autism and anxiety. It was always incredibly difficult for me to even start talking to people. But something I kind of realize is all it really takes is just like.
So Colin just froze. So we're going to wait for him to come back, but I'll go ahead and move on to another question. You know, when Colin was talking about this answer to us, he focused so much on what community. But again, the bravery of saying you're putting yourself out there, and that's what it takes. So good on you, Colin, and we'll wait for you to come back. I'm going to ask the question about social skills, because that's something that we know are such, you know, we need, right? We go into our employment setting. So Morgan and Kath, what if you were to identify specific social skills, what would those be? And Kath, do you want to take the first?
Oh, okay. I guess for the first, I really emphasize oral and written communication skills, especially written. I really emphasize email responsiveness, clear and concise language, double checking, triple checking, quadruple checking, if you're me, what you write before you send it. I always recommend proofreading. Second skill I'd say would be active listening. Pay close attention to whoever's speaking to you and the information that they share. Sometimes that means taking notes so you don't lose important information. You know, understand the important points of the conversation, keep focused, and always ask clarifying questions. Third skill I'd say would be social confidence and self-advocacy. A big part of my job involves working with others. It's a team effort, so I can't work effectively with people I don't talk to or make sure I understand. Many of my tasks at work can't be done without having conversations on task details or without me self-advocating for more information I need. Coworkers want to help you do things right, but they can't do that if you don't ask. And so you really need confidence to communicate and self-advocate. And relatedly to that, I kind of call it a skill, but being kind to yourself. We've talked a lot about that in Evolve, and I consider it a skill in the sense that being optimistic increases your ability and opportunities to use your social skills, whether that's at work or outside work. Really, the idea that it's okay if you make mistakes, just treat interactions as a learning experience and not, you know, a final that you have to pass. And you'll find yourself communicating more often and more easily by being your own cheerleader instead of a critic.
Good point. Morgan, what do you think?
Yeah, rather than specific, because Catherine, I think, mentioned a lot of the specific ones, one of the things that I've noticed working with Robin and Evolve is social skills are very sort of difficult to pick up if you're not naturally attuned to that. I feel like most people sort of learn social skills the way they do like a language, where it's just something that becomes sort of innate to them. And if you ask for the specific rules, they can't really tell you what they are because they didn't learn it as rules. They learned it by example. So I think one of the big things is just that self-advocacy and self-management, where you just ask people, ask yourself, ask people, and learn from your mistakes, as Catherine was saying. And you just sort of rely on that empathy and kindness to yourself to try and learn from it. And just realize that, you know, there's not going to be easy answers. Every situation's a little different. Every person's a little different. So you're not trying to make a grade or pass a test. You're just trying to interact with the people around.
Beautiful. Colin, if you were in charge, what skills do you think would be useful to be taught in high school to help prepare you for this transition?
Thing that comes to my mind is like being taught how to understand your own strengths and weaknesses and how to take advantage of that. That's something I've always struggled with growing up. I know, like, especially for a lot of people with autism, a lot of the times they hear you have to reach out, or you have to, you know, it's mainly like along the lines of like, you know, you have to reach out, you have to ask for help and stuff. But one thing I always struggled with was understanding what exactly I need help in, or like what exactly I need to reach out for. Because it was always difficult for me to understand like what was I actually having like difficulty with. and certain topics or certain subjects. And that can be like very like what's the word for it? It can be very disheartening to some of us, because like we don't know like what the problem is, but we know there's a problem. So that's definitely one aspect of it. And the other aspect of understanding your strengths and how to take advantage of that is that a lot of us do have like stuff that we know we're good at, but really catapulting yourself off of what you're really good at is something that there's a lack of when it comes to our communities. And just being encouraged to use those strengths that you have to encourage yourself, to build confidence, and to really like have a positive outlook on like your future is very important, I feel. So just like having students, or really just people in general, be guided into understanding like what they're good at, what they're not good at, and how to approach it is something that is I think is incredibly important.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Morgan, is there anything that you wanted to, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask this next question. So when you develop, the soft skills, right? So when we talk about those skills, about our soft skills, are the skills that no one teaches us. They just expect you to know, right? So can you just talk about in terms of how useful they are, what the ones are to be when you're in an employment setting to meet expectations?
I mean, yeah, there's one of the problems with soft skills is, as you said, everybody's sort of expected to know them. One of the other problems is that sort of like asking somebody who speaks English what the rules of English are. People who know how to socialize don't also know like the technical rules of socializing. So when you're sort of asking about the soft skills that you need to learn, it's often a very slow process of trying to pick apart where you're running into trouble and having sort of this self-awareness, which could take just a tremendous amount of time and effort to build up. I often joke that I'm about 10 years behind where somebody my age would normally be, just because of the amount of time it takes to develop those soft skills. It's so slow, but the results can be really good. Now I've got a job, talk to people, I'm doing this panel, which is not something I thought I could have done even 10 years ago. So just remember that it's going to take a lot of time, but it's worth it to spend that time.
Beautiful. I love that. Guys, just for the interest of time, we have the two last questions I really want us to have time on, if that's okay. Kath, I just let you know that, so much of what we do, it's all about ready for employment. That's in Evolve, what we focus on. And so we go out and speak to employers all the time. So Kath, if you had the ability to speak to heads of companies, what would you want them to know to diversify, to further think about neurodiversity in their workforce?
I guess really, I tell them that welcoming someone onto your team means more than just giving an invitation. It's the beginning of a conversation of how to meet in the middle and open a working connection for communication and mutual respect. If there's, like, for example, if there's somewhere you want me to improve, give me an honest, direct feedback. Likewise, I'll do my best to work on improving and self-advocate to you. As a person on the spectrum, I have to get comfortable with getting uncomfortable, or get comfortable with getting uncomfortable when it comes to integrating into the workplace and larger society. All I ask is to be respectful of my efforts to be a productive member of your team and meet me halfway as I take on my challenges, whether that means accommodations or simply compassion in a given situation. Just empathy makes a world of a difference. For example, don't be annoyed by someone who's asking you too many questions. Better that I ask too many than too little. And I'm here because I want to be a team player and have a positive impact in the workplace. And because of our communication differences, some things will be lost in translation, but please don't give up on communicating with me, because I'm not giving up on communicating with you.
Beautiful. Colin, this is our last question. Gonna ask for each of you, but Colin, can you provide the parents in today's audience some tips on ways that they can prepare their teen and young adults as they move into high school, out of high school into college or a job?
I guess this is kind of like a piggyback off of what I previously said, but I think the most important thing is understanding the flaws that a student or like a teenager might have, and not allowing them to not allowing those flaws to hold them back, essentially. That's something my mom did a lot that helped me. Growing up with autism, you have certain things that you're not great at, but encouraging a child to not really be held back by those flaws, to build around what you're good at, and learning how to work around them is something that I feel is incredibly important. Because when a student starts to become more and more independent, especially when they go off in college, and they have a better sense of security within themselves, it really can help with their confidence levels. It can really help them navigate through more uncomfortable situations. That's how it's worked out for me. And on the other side, it's just understand what their strengths are, build upon those. And I feel like the number one thing is just encouragement. Because I feel like the best thing a parent can do is encourage their kids to do great, because if they do so, then, way more often than not, they will end up doing great things. So I say that's the best advice I can give.
I love that. Okay, Morgan, do you want to finish it up for us with this same question about some tips and ideas for parents?
Yeah. I mean, it's always going to be difficult, but as I said to the previous question, I think it's really worth it to put in that extra work. I mean, a recent example I could think of is my grandma, who's about 90. I think she just turned 90. Is having some health problems and some dementia. And recently, we all sort of went to see her and spent some time talking to her. And afterwards, a lot of people were coming up to me and saying, "Oh, you're so good at talking to her. You're so good at dealing with this." And I was like, a little bit surprised by the positive feedback I was getting for what to me seemed like a social activity. But looking back on it, it really is my unusual experience and my sort of gradually working on the fundamentals and building up these skills to be social that allowed me to do that in a very unusual and difficult circumstance. We often sort of talk about neurodiversity as being a good thing, but having these real tangible examples of how powerful it can be a really rewarding thing to look for, and very motivating when you're looking at what you're going to do in the future and what to sort of aim for.
Beautiful. I think that's a beautiful way to end this. I want to thank you guys so much for your incredible answers. Sue, I know that we had talked about, doing some question and answers, so I will turn it over to you.
Okay, yeah, I don't think we have enough time for this Q&A, but please continue to post questions in the Q&A chat so our panels can answer questions. Thank you, Morgan, Catherine, and Colin, for your amazing, sharing your amazing stories and insights. And thank you, Robin, for moderating this session once again this year. Yeah, so in the interest of time, we'll continue the Q&A through writing, as I said. So if you have questions for our panels, including Dr. Kuntz, please type them in the chat or the Q&A. So now we're going to get into resources for transition to adulthood, and we are going to start with a brief presentation about Evolve. So Robin, you're up again. You're muted.
Sorry, I am muted. Sorry. I have some slides, but if that's not possible, I can just go ahead and just chat about Evolve for a couple minutes.
I mean, if you have slides, feel free to share.
Okay, beautiful. So let's do this. There we go. Okay, wonderful. So our program Evolve and is it's an 11-month intensive soft skills training program. And really it's the whole focus is employment. So young adults come to us. We are vendored through the regional center for Harbor Regional Center specifically, although we have taken clients from other regional centers on a case-by-case basis. It's all approved through the regional center. So it's completely paid for. It's an 11-month program for young adults who have completed high school. So certificate of completion, diploma bound. And it's really about these young adults who are motivated to get into competitive employment in whatever career that they are passionate about. It's very person-centered, meaning this is all about their journey. And, we have young adults who come to us very clear about what they want to do. We have others that are just discovering, and we say, it's okay. We're just going to work on those fundamental skills that are going to make you successful in employment. And it's the things that Catherine and Colin and Morgan spoke about: communication skills, problem solving, understanding the hidden rules of social interactions, dealing with changes, really understanding your brains. Because if you can know how you learn and really understand it, you're able to explain it to an employer to say, these are the conditions that I will do my very best job and be an asset to your company. We focus on a lot of self-discovery. We give our young adults an 11-month course for them to understand themselves and who they are beyond their educational diagnosis. They learn all about adulting, and it's a chance for them to really build their confidence. And I spoke about the participants. It's really about people who are self-motivated, who are, on the spectrum, run ADHD, learning differences, and are open to an 11-month commitment. And the other piece is that they need to be able to manage themselves in a group. They don't have to like it, but be able to self-manage, because our goal is within that 11 months to enter into an internship. And then, James mentioned earlier, he was talking about the paid internship program. We are so fortunate. We have this beautiful tool, the paid internship program, where the young adults can have an opportunity to use that while they're involved to find a job that they're, a focus that they're interested in. And we find the companies that are open to a neurodiverse workforce, and we partner with them to give them work experience with the goal of employment. So they do get a job coach. We pay for the wages. This is a slide that lists all the different kinds of jobs that we've helped, internships into employment that we've helped our young adults find. So it all depends on what they come in with us, from welding to working in a ranch. It does not matter to us. Morgan and Catherine are now in Dr. Kasari's lab as researchers. Anyway, that's Evolve in a nutshell. We're in our 6th year, 85% of our young adults are actually accessing employment in careers they're passionate about. So if you're interested in learning more, we have our website is transitionsconsulting.org. And you can take a look at us then. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robin, for the helpful information about Evolve. We will continue with our resources, and we have videos provided by South Central Los Angeles Regional Center, Department of Rehabilitation, and Buglehorn Autism Support Group. And after the videos, we will do raffles, so please stay with us. But if you do have to leave, since we are going a bit over time, please fill out the evaluation survey posted in the chat. Okay, we'll play the videos now.
Good morning. My name is Wendy Castillo, and I'm the employment specialist for the South Central Los Angeles Regional Center. Today, we're going to talk about the Employment First policy, employment programs, paid internship programs, and competitive integrated employment. And I'd like to start with the Employment First policy, because California became the 12th state to enact this Employment First policy. Governor Brown was the governor of California, and on October 9th, 2013, 2013, he established the Employment First policy. But what does that mean? That meant that individuals with a disability now have the same right as you and I have in reference to employment, in reference to same wages. So let's talk about employment programs. I first like to talk about who can go into these employment programs, because we can't duplicate services. So any individual 18 years or older who've graduated from high school with a high school diploma or receive a certificate of completion. What's the difference between those? Any individual that is 18 years or older and has gone through the traditional school system will graduate with a high school diploma. Those individuals that graduate at the age of 22 receive a certificate of completion. And that's the difference between the high school diploma and a certificate of completion. The two types of employment program is the employment service program. This is for the individuals that need help to begin with employment, maybe job training, maybe resume, maybe looking for opportunities for employment. You know, if you're thinking your son and daughter doesn't know quite well what it wants to do, an employment service program may be the ideal. But you're probably going, Wendy, that sounds wonderful, but my son or daughter is already working. We have supportive employment programs. These are programs that are vendored and approved by Department of Rehabilitation, and the job coaches are certified and are able to train hands-on your son or daughter at his workplace. Now we'd like to go over to what we call tailor day services. So let's say that sounds great, Wendy, but my son or daughter is not quite ready to go into an employment program, or maybe my son or daughter would rather go to a day program. So those individuals that are in a day program because they like socializing or not quite yet, we've gone through a rough year, we can add a component to that day program, and that's what we call tailor day service. We talked about the different employment programs, but let's talk about competitive integrated employment. And what does that mean? It's either a full-time or part-time employment. And what it is that what we look at is to ensure that we offer opportunities for employment for our individuals that we serve into a employment setting that has other people that do not have a disability, and that their wages are the same entry wages of someone going into that same position without a disability. So why is this important? Is in the past, we would have what we called a sheltered workshop, where the individuals would go into a warehouse and it would only be individuals with the same disability making maybe $1 a week or $1 a day. What we want to ensure is to allow them to be part of this community, to be part of something beautiful, and to have the same benefits that you and I have. So now you're probably wondering, how can we open these doors? How can we make this happen? Well, we offer a paid internship program. With those employment services, if the individual wants to work, we need to open those doors because we know how wonderful your son or daughter is, how wonderful the individuals we serve are. So we need to break down those barriers and open the doors. So our employment programs will reach out to these employers of that individual's choice, and we'll pay up to 1,040 hours per year or until the funds are exhausted. So that's about 20 hours a week, maybe less, maybe more, depending on the individual's needs. It could be full-time, it could be part-time. The goal of this internship is for that individual to get hands-on experience on the job so that at the end of the internship, the employer realizes how wonderful they are and will be willing to hire them. Internships can be with small business or corporations in the area, and they can work under the guidance of a professional to learn a vocation. So we don't limit what kind of internship the individual wants because it's all by the individual's preference. He will dictate or she will dictate what kind of employment they want. Now I mentioned Department of Rehabilitation. It is a great resource to have. They work with us. They can offer services for your son or daughter, because you're probably wondering, Wendy, this sounds wonderful, but my daughter or son's not ready to work. Maybe they want to go to college. Go to your Department of Rehabilitation, open a case, see if they qualify. They have wonderful service that can assist your son or daughter while they're in college. They have wonderful service if maybe your son or daughter wants to open his own business or her own business. They can assist with certain classes to guide your son or daughter on how to get that business open. It is a great resource. If you're trying to figure out how to go to www.dor.ca.gov and you can put in your zip code and your address, and it would tell you which agency is the closest to you. One of the best resources you can have, and it's free. Here's some other resources for you as a parent you can have. I thank you for this time, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Welcome to the California Department of Rehabilitation. DOR works in partnership with consumers and other stakeholders to provide services and advocacy in pursuit of employment, independent living, and equality for Californians with disabilities. At DOR, it is our fundamental belief that individuals with disabilities can be fully integrated and highly productive community members, employees, and colleagues. To be eligible for services, an individual must have a physical or mental disability that substantially impedes his or her ability to secure employment, require vocational rehabilitation services to prepare for, secure, retain, or regain employment consistent with the applicant's unique strengths, resources, priorities, concerns, abilities, capabilities, interests, and informed choice. Program participants are expected to be available, responsible, active, and dedicated contributors to their own success. To be equal, a disability is not a limitation. All people with disabilities have the right to work, perform, and contribute to society. Be independent. With a dedicated sense of personal commitment, anyone with a disability can attain a level of independence that not only increases their self-worth, but also minimizes the strain on taxpayer-funded financial support. Be employed. With training and support, an individual with a disability can access new opportunities to have a higher quality of life. We tailor our services to each person individually to ensure a greater chance for success. A vocational rehabilitation team works closely with each job seeker to establish the best combination of services and resources necessary to prepare for, find, and retain employment. Our services include benefits planning, career assessment and counseling, job search and interview skills, independent living skills, career education and training, and assistive technology. Businesses benefit from programs that support the recruitment and hiring of people with disabilities. Hiring an individual with a disability is an opportunity. Employees with disabilities bring unique experiences and understanding that can transform workplaces, products, and services. Several incentives are available, including tax incentives in the form of the Work Opportunity Tax Credit and on-the-job training. Incentives can help cover the cost of accommodations for employees with disabilities. By hiring people with disabilities, employers are the key to DOR's mission. DOR provides education and information to businesses and can help with integration when needed. We believe in the talent and potential of individuals with disabilities. For more information, visit our website at www.dor.ca.gov. or follow us on social media. You can also subscribe to our latest news at www.dornews.org.
I think we have just one more video to share.
Good morning, everyone. We're talking about transitioning towards independence. Recently, the Biden administration announced that our public health emergency will expire on May 11th. We are transitioning from that. So today we're talking about transitioning our children from one level to the next. And I want to just share my story about transitioning. My name is Florence Bracey, and I have a son, Brad, who's 31 years old. And recently, a friend of mine invited my husband and I to go to Houston to visit her. And I said, okay, so what about Brad? Because we never left him alone. And then I was introduced to the support circles. And this is Brad's circle of friends and family and church and work. This is his world. Yeah, he goes to TAP, church, school, neighborhood, work, family, and he volunteers. The concept of the support circles is that you ask people to support you. And I said, oh my goodness, I had never been exposed to that. But this is what his circle of support looks like. He volunteers. So I said, you know what? I'm going to ask some people to help me with Brad to go on this trip. So I asked my cousin who would pick him up from college and take him home or bring him from home to college. And then on Friday night, I asked my sister-in-law, you know, mind you, I've never asked people for help, and to go take him to dinner on Friday night. And Saturday, asked a family friend to pick him up from TAP and take him to TAP, my other friend. And Sunday, my daughter picked him up with her family, and they spent the day together. And we were home by 6 o'clock on Sunday. So that was such a wonderful trip. And these are some of the things we learned about in my support group, Buglehorn. So we meet monthly with the support group, and I bring speakers in to talk about different things as it relates to autism. We have a chat and chill, monthly parent meet and greet. We are resuming our spa trip that we do annually, a teen and young adult group, and food distribution. If you'd like to contact me, my information is florencebracey.com or buglehornautism at Gmail, 323-574-0862. So I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you. If you know of any families that are interested in a support group, please contact them.